All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack what is honestly one of the most chilling corporate incident reports we've ever come across. We are looking at a case file that led to the permanent, entirely unexplained closure of a major facility over in Gurgaon, India, a place called Saffron BPO. We're going to break down the exact sequence of events, track the, well, let's call them anomalies, and really look at the terrifying reality of what happens when your standard modern corporate workspace literally collides with something ancient and completely inexplicable.
But before we even get into the timeline, I want you to ask yourself a question. What would you actually do if you found out the coworker sitting right in the cubicle next to you, someone you literally saw log in, someone you grabbed coffee with, the star performer of your whole team, had actually passed away 8 years ago? It's a wildly provocative question, I know. But as you're about to see in this analysis, this wasn't just some hypothetical thought experiment for the night shift team at Saffron BPO. This was their absolute terrifying reality.
Okay, so let's start with Section 1, the setup, Saffron BPO.
So our incident report kicks off in the totally exhausting environment of a graveyard shift in the industrial area of Udyog Vihar. Picture it. Outside, it's a ghost town. Inside, it's just this echoing hall of exhausted agents staring at harsh white screens. And right in the middle of this totally mundane corporate grind was this ideal employee named Rose. She was taking calls, hitting her metrics, absolute star performer. But then a massive operational anomaly popped up and triggered a serious red flag. Now, a typical BPO call, that lasts about 10 to 15 minutes of standard back-and-forth interaction with a customer. But Rose's final call, which started right around 12:30 a.m., dragged on for multiple hours. And she wasn't talking normally. She was just whispering into her headset. This massive deviation from protocol meant floor management had to jump in.
And man, things escalated fast when management intervened. Worried for her safety, the team leader actually tapped into Rose's ongoing call to listen in. And what they heard was chilling. It was just dead air. Absolute silence on the other end of the line. No customer, no caller, nothing. So when the team leader confronts her about what's going on, Rose doesn't even say a single word. She just glares at them with this sudden, intense anger, grabs her bag, and walks right out of the office. Boom. That was it. That was the literal last time she was ever seen on the floor.
Which brings us to Section 2, the revelation. For 3 whole days, Rose's seat just sat there, empty. Her phone was totally unreachable. So the team leader follows standard corporate protocol, pulls up her joining form, and reaches out to her emergency contact address. And that is when they hit a horrifying data point. 8. Both the neighbors and Rose's own parents confirmed that Rose hadn't just gone off the grid or quit. She had passed away exactly 8 years prior to that night shift. I really want you to just let that sink in for a second. The girl sitting there, typing on the keyboard, logging into the system, taking calls every single night, had been dead for 8 years.
Which leads us perfectly to this incredibly haunting quote from our source material: "If she died years ago, who was working with us?" Seriously, talk about a terrifying paradox gripping the remaining employees, right? I mean, they had seen her bag was physically sitting on her chair, her system was logged in. If she was a spirit, how on earth was she manipulating the physical, corporate environment all around them? As you can imagine, the psychological toll this took on the team was immediate, and the vibe in the office just rapidly began to deteriorate.
Moving on to Section 3, escalating anomalies.
Okay, so once the truth was actually out there, this paranormal activity aggressively bled into the physical workspace, completely tossing logic and science right out the window. The timeline of these encounters escalated so fast, it starts a little subtly on day 3, just some unexplained footsteps echoing near a completely empty pantry. But then, it gets visual. An agent is in the washroom, washing her hands, looks up into the mirror, and sees a girl standing directly behind her. It's Rose's face, but with these piercing, blood-red eyes. Next up, we actually get documented digital evidence. CCTV footage from the empty pantry captures a totally normal shadow cast by a water cooler, slowly morphing into the silhouette of a human girl. And finally, the absolute craziest system breach. Rose's physical computer, sitting at an empty desk, boots up entirely on its own and automatically logs into the internal network using her specific agent ID before just logging back out. The entity wasn't just haunting the place, it was actively interacting with the corporate network.
Let's look at Section 4, the elevator to hell.
Now we're going to shift our focus to Samar. He was a skeptical coworker who was about to have a truly terrifying solo experience. Picture this. It's 3 a.m., the shift is almost over, and the office is dead quiet. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Samar's internal desk phone rings. He answers it expecting a customer, but instead he hears Rose's voice, plain as day, saying, "Hello, Rose this side, how can I help you?" He literally slams the phone down in a panic. And the very second he does, the harsh fluorescent lights of the entire call center start flickering violently before plunging the entire floor into absolute pitch-black darkness.
His escape route became a literal, real-life nightmare. So, step 1. Samar is sitting in the dark, bathed only in the moonlight coming through the window, and he watches Rose's empty chair slowly start spinning entirely on its own. Terrified, he carefully makes his way to the pantry just to splash some water on his face. Step 2. Right at the water cooler, a voice right behind him whispers, "Hi, Samar, you forgot me." He whips around and sees a girl with messy hair and those exact same terrifying red eyes. Step 3. He just bolts. He sprints to the elevator, gets inside, and frantically jams the button for the ground floor. The doors close. And then, step 4. The elevator goes down, but when those doors slide open, he is not in the corporate lobby. The elevator opens directly into a dark, sprawling graveyard, completely filled with lifeless, zombie-like corpses, and they are all slowly turning their heads to stare dead at him.
And right there, standing among those staring corpses, was Rose. She looked right at him and delivered this horrifying line. "You like me, Samar? Why don't you say hi?" At this point, Samar just collapsed into the corner of the elevator, squeezing his eyes shut, mashing the close button over and over again, completely trapped in this nightmare. The very next thing he knew, the doors were opening again. The morning shift had arrived. They found Samar sitting huddled in the corner of a perfectly normal, sunlit corporate lobby, just violently shivering. There was no graveyard. There were no corpses anywhere.
This takes us to Section 5, the Graveyard Secret.
Unsurprisingly, Samar immediately quit his job that very morning, vowing he would never set foot in there again. But it was a few weeks later that local property owners finally revealed the why behind this massive anomaly. You see, the modern, shiny glass and steel structure of Saffron BPO wasn't just built on regular commercial real estate. It was constructed directly on top of a demolished graveyard. The graves had literally been destroyed and paved over just to make way for a corporate workspace. This horrifying little real estate secret provided the origin for the entire anomaly. Rose wasn't just a deceased employee. She was a wandering spirit essentially bound to the desecrated earth right directly beneath their cubicles.
I mean, you just can't sustain a corporate environment on top of that kind of spiritual epicenter, right? Ultimately, Saffron BPO was permanently shut down. The sheer volume of system breaches and those visual manifestations just became way too much to handle. The business completely folded, and the building was entirely abandoned. And honestly, you'd think simply walking away from the building would be the end of it, wouldn't you?
Well, let's look at Section 6, the 3:45 a.m. call. Here is a very specific truth regarding paranormal attachments. They really don't care about corporate building closures. Months had passed since the incident. Samar had completely moved on. He got a new job at a totally new company. His life was entirely back to normal, and the trauma of Saffron BPO was basically fading into a bad memory. But then, one night, he's sound asleep in his bed. At exactly 3:45 a.m., his personal cell phone rings. It's an unknown number. He ignores it. But it rings again. Groggy and annoyed, he picks it up and mumbles hello. And for a few agonizing seconds, there is absolutely nothing but the crackle of dead static. And then, cutting right through that static, a perfectly clear, highly professional voice spoke up. "Hello, Rose this side, how can I help you?" It was the exact same corporate greeting from the abandoned office. The attachment hadn't stayed at the building. It had followed him home.
But wait, because the absolute most terrifying data point of this entire case file was sitting right there on his screen. The caller ID wasn't just some random unknown digit. It perfectly, exactly matched the landline number of the disconnected, permanently shut down Saffron BPO office, a literal phone line that physically no longer exists. And according to the case file, that disconnected phone number now calls Samar every single night at exactly 3:45 a.m. We've examined the data, we've looked at the timeline, and we've explored the terrifying intersection of a modern workspace built on top of forgotten graves. It definitely makes you look at your own office a little differently, doesn't it? It kind of makes you wonder about the history of the ground right beneath your desk, or, the true identity of the person sitting next to you. So as we wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. The next time your phone lights up in the dead of night from an unknown number, who is calling you tonight?